All right, welcome to another episode of Warrior versus Zombie. And as always, I have an amazing warrior guest for you today, Sallie Wagner. And I'll introduce her in a second. But first, let me remind you of why you're here. Success is a journey, it's not a destination. As warriors, we all have a history of ups and downs, wins and losses that are all part of making us who we are up to this point, and they provide a foundation for our path forward. We all battle our inner zombie as well as those zombies in our world. And in each episode, I interview warriors who are aspiring leaders from all walks of life: entrepreneurs, artists, health practitioners, business owners, literally any inspired leader that has a story to tell. These warriors have a cause, they have unique value, and a vision that goes generations into the future. And today's guest is absolutely no exception. Sallie Wagner is an awesome warrior. She's a wife, a mother, a speaker, an author, a lawyer, real estate broker, and life coach, or as she says, a life alchemist. Sallie incorporates outcome based techniques such as EFT, NLP, and trauma aware modalities so you'll see concrete results as you ditch those unwanted behaviors and habits, fears and phobias that keep you from living your best life. I'm excited to hear about that as we get into our third segment. But Sallie has spent the majority of her law career in the corporate world. We have something in common there. I used to hire teams of lawyers to do a lot of stuff that I did in various industries. She currently provides broker and contract compliance services to real estate brokerages and owns and operates a real estate school, providing educational opportunities for real estate and real estate professionals throughout Florida. So you're in Florida now, I know. So Sallie Wagner, welcome to Warrior versus Zombie. How are things in Florida?
Fabulous. It's a little bit overcast today, so not quite as sunny as typical.
Yeah, we talked the other day, and I think it was overcast there. I think that's one of the things about Florida, and I love Florida. I mean, I'm a Disney guy, so I used to go there in Key West, and I love that. A few cruises out of Miami, hung out there. So Florida is a great state. I just think, next to Texas, where I am, I think Florida would be my second choice, mainly because of the government and other things, but and the climate. And I'm not into cold weather anymore myself. So,
Yeah.
anything exciting or unusual going on in your world before we get into the meat of things here?
Oh, just lots of exciting and interesting things going on in real estate, as always.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm sure that that'll season some of our conversations. But yeah, I've got a lot of brokers in our network. It was a rapid explosion in there, and then when the interest rates have started to go up, um, things are kind of we still, like I think you have in Florida, we still have a huge influx of people from both coasts that seem. I know that you're on a coast, but I'm saying here in Texas, we have
Right.
people from New York, escaping from New York to Texas. We have probably more people than that from the left coast or from California,
Mhm.
scrambling to get out of there, coming to Texas. So I saw an interesting statistic. We here in Texas, we added over 2 million new registered voters to the rolls. 99% of them were from out of that had weren't residents of Texas. They came in, became residents in the last 2 years prior to the 2020 election this year. So that's crazy.
Yeah,
That's really amazing to me. But
it is.
and I
Yes.
think you guys are getting similar statistics, I think, in Florida, right?
Yes, we are. I saw something interesting as well recently. $2.7 million in net income migration every hour of every day into Florida. So that's quite a
Yeah.
lot of money, and people bringing that money into Florida.
Yeah, and as long as they remember why they left where they came from and they bring the money there, because most of them, at least here, they're economic refugees. Either they're getting away from the taxes, the crime, the other things that I'm a networker, right? So I've got hundreds of thousands of connections across different, and the preponderance of things I get, but it's kind of fascinating to me. I love people. I love understanding what makes people tick, what makes people think, what they do. So yeah, I think that's amazing. 2 million input. I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be nice to get that in our budget, right?
Right.
So, but that's fascinating. Well, we both kind of went to different places, right? Because you kind of hail from middle America, Kansas City, like I do. So and you ended up in Florida, and I ended up in Texas, and I still love
Yes.
Kansas City, but I still got family there.
Yeah.
But but yeah, it's good to see. Well, let's do this. I want to get in. I really want to get into your story. I want to hear how you got from where you started. And I know you and I both have a lot of stories, so you get to pick where you want to start, from where you started to where you are today. And then after that, we'll get into what you're doing. So let's take a quick break, hear a little of our theme song from Ricky Jean Wright, It's Not the Getting There. And we'll be right back with Sallie Wagner and Warrior versus Zombie. All right, we are back. And Sallie, I'm really interested to hear how all this lawyer, real estate, all this stuff coming from Kansas City, now in Florida, all your stories. So tell us how did you get from where you started to where you are today?
All right. When I was in college, I started out as a physics major, and I eventually ended up in theology. So it was kind of physics to metaphysics. And then I went to law school. I changed the trajectory because my trajectory was going to be advanced education, being a professor. I went to law school. I did all the things that you're supposed to do, and yet I still had that passion for what physics and metaphysics tell us about the nature of reality and the nature of ourselves. And it just kept after me, and I describe it as that feeling of being successfully discontent, where things look pretty good on paper, but it doesn't feel as good inside as you thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just answered that calling to come back to those interests that I had. And I started with life coaching. I started first with working with people with EFT. And then I added the other pieces to what I'm doing today with a combination of EFT, NLP, hypnosis, and trauma aware approaches to really help people make true concrete changes in their lives.
So let me ask you this. And we'll get into, that's kind of sounds like some of the building blocks or the things that you're doing right now. And as with most warriors, we tend to focus forward, which is a warrior attribute, by the way. We
Yeah.
focus forward, we move forward. We don't dwell or focus in the rearview mirror only to say, okay, well, I'm glad that didn't happen. Yeah, but tell me a little bit about that. Uh, the zombies that you faced, or the things that you encountered making those kinds of transitions, because I know what that's like. By the way, you and I are very aligned.
Yeah.
I think we shared a little bit. Part of the genesis of what I do today is a result of not lack of success, just very much lack of peace about what I was doing at the time. And that had its own challenges or things that to keep moving forward with that passion or that focus. So tell me about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, I've had a lot of dramatic changes in my life. My first husband passed away. That was huge, ripped a giant hole in the fabric of reality,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Job and career changes. I was in the corporate world. You know what that's like. I had young kids. I thought, oh, it'll be stable. Right. Not. And so all of those corporate changes that I've lived through. And then there are the other kinds of changes I call it life creep, when you just wake up one day and wonder what happened with your life. So all of those are the zombies that I faced, and a lot of the most significant ones were those internal ones where you just feel like, I felt like I was living somebody else's life, not my own life. And just coming to the realization that if I truly believe what I say I believe, then I must change my life to live it. And that was quite a journey. I took the scenic route.
Well, I think we all take the scenic route. And I think, and you've hit on a number of, general, but I kind of get your story. If you don't mind, I'd like to, so your husband passed away, and how many kids did you have?
Too.
Two kids, and what were their ages at the time?
My daughter was 17 and my son was not quite 22.
Wow. So they had already, that was not only a major hole and disruption in your world, and at that time you were corporate. Do I have that
Yes.
right? So you were
Yes.
working corporate. You thought, okay, I've got some stability on the
Mhm.
job front. I'm sure they were very sensitive to the situation and whatever. But tell me, I mean, so making that, how much of that whole dynamic, or the zombies that converged on you at that point, how much did that factor into you kind of the autopilot feeling, or the, hey,
Yeah.
I'm not living my life purpose? Was that part of the equation?
Well, yeah, of course. And yet, it wasn't immediate. It took some time to really begin to manifest into my reality. And
Hmm.
yet, anytime you're faced with mortality, whether it's your own or someone else's, you begin to ask those questions. And there was also a lot of grief and guilt involved in
Oh
that.
yeah.
We always experience that when we lose someone. And so overcoming those internal zombies, the limiting beliefs and the limiting decisions that come from those beliefs, it is a process. And many times we think that time heals wounds and we just kind of wait it out until it gets better, and that's not true. It
No,
doesn't.
we tend to push them down.
Yeah.
We tend to push them down, and
Yeah.
they don't go away. They just sit
Right.
there and fester below the surface,
Yeah.
which is also, I can bet, if I were a betting man, I would say that it probably informs some of the things you're able to do with your clients today. So I think that's in retrospect, working through those zombies of all that negative energy, those lower frequencies that
Mhm.
really pull us down, in terms of scarcity, loss, guilt, all these things, right?
Yeah.
I can tell that. So yeah, so a lot of warriors, you said something very important there that I don't want the audience to miss, is that it doesn't go away. You have to deal with it. And it's kind of like back in the day when I was worked in GM and worked building cars for a living, right? If you fix the problem earlier, it was easier to fix than if you wait till it gets into the system and then all of a sudden it becomes part of your daily routine. And then unpacking that requires things like NLP and EFT and
Yeah.
psychotherapy, other types of modalities to kind of say, okay, now we got to, the result is not the issue. It's there's things below the surface. So I think that's brilliant. So tell me about that. So how are you, how did your kids, how did I mean, you dealt with that. Tell me, your journey from there to, we'll get to,
Yeah.
when we get to today, we'll take a break, but I want to.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the big pieces of my recovery was EFT, emotional freedom techniques.
Mhm.
I met someone who practiced that. I worked with her, and I really got some good results for myself personally in addressing grief and loss and pain and all of those kinds of issues. And so that prompted me to learn to do it so that I could work with other
Mhm.
people on similar issues and other issues as well. Um, it, Having that piece in place, it was still just kind of a part-time thing. It was like, oh yeah, I do EFT. And my kids would ask me, hey, I'm studying for a big exam, can you help me, So I would almost like parlor tricks, right? And then I started thinking, wow, this is really helpful to people and it's valuable. So I just over the years started adding the other pieces to it, some formal coaching training, NLP training. I'd learned about it many years ago, so I learned more about it. And now the hypnosis, it all comes together to really bring value to people to, as I say, make real change and get concrete results.
Yeah, that's one of the things I so love about warriors and talking to them in this is we find things, and we're all infected by our zombies, and we all have to work hard at overcoming those. But once you've worked through things, I find this over and over and over again, and myself is in the same boat, included, is that you work through your own journey and you figure things out that worked for you. And then as we get down the road a little bit, we realize you see other people along the path that are trying to walk maybe a line, but having struggles and stuff. And you realize you can be a Sherpa, or you can help them kind of, hey, I'm a little further down the road. And then all of a sudden that becomes, you realize that the universe or God, it brought you to that place where you can serve people and you focus outside yourself, whether it's your family, your community, those that are brought into along your path that you see. And I so love that about warriors. So tell me, and the other thing is your intentionality, the things that you said, because you went around and you made some changes, right? You said, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, this has got to change. And so, that's the zombie brain. If you just go through, 95% of the thoughts you thought yesterday are the same thoughts you're thinking today. If you don't break that cycle, if you don't have a pattern interrupt there, if you don't do some things right differently, then your history is your destiny. You don't change anything. So tell me about that. So I think we're getting close to today, but tell me, any other challenges along those ways, inside or outside?
Oh, well, yes, all of the programming. I grew up in North Carolina. I'm not a native of Kansas City, but I lived out there for a long time. And I grew up in a very poor family, low education levels. I was the first in my immediate family to go to law school or to go to college and then on to law school. So that was a huge paradigm shifter right there. And then, having that programming of you get a good job and you stay in that job as long as you can, till you retire. The corporate world was not conducive to that, though. And I struggled with that, thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to get another corporate job and this is going to be it. And finally, just the glass breaking inside my head that was limiting my thinking about, I can start my own business. That was huge. That was a huge zombie to overcome, rather than thinking I need to work for somebody else, to think, hey, I can do it myself. And that was such a huge step in making conscious choices in life. You said this, so many of us are on autopilot, the zombie mode. We're not making conscious choices. We're just running on our programming. And to be able to reclaim the power of conscious choice is a big thrust of what my coaching is about.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And we'll talk about your coaching right after we take a break. But one of the things you said here that I don't want people to miss, which is really, really important, is that you made those conscious choices, and the underpinning stuff I also can relate to, because I came from lower middle class. I was the first one to go to, my dad worked from the stock room all the way to a vice president role, same company, with Sears that's all we knew. That changed when we were, we're again, similar, that changed. And then all of a sudden that source of dependence, that source of faith, if you will, was pulled out from under, and all of a sudden it wasn't reciprocal. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, if that was your source of confidence or peace, it went away. And so that's why today's millennials, who I have 5 millennial children, so I get, they're not going to depend on a company. I mean, at least not like we did. So that is a huge zombie. And for those that are listening to this podcast that are warriors that have got more journey behind them, like Sallie and I, um, that's one we pretty much most all had to overcome if we started. I mean, I worked for
Yeah.
General Motors, big company, everybody was proud of me, all that stuff, right? And then and you're a lawyer, nobody else has been nobody went to college, much less been in law school. I mean, I can see where we minimize that, but those are there, especially when we now get out of that boat and start trying to walk on water as an entrepreneur or a small business owner. So, well, let's do this. Let's take another quick break. I want to come back. I want to make sure we get a chance to hear about what you're doing today, why you're doing it, the impact you want to have. And I want to also mention before we take this break that if you want to hear more of that, tomorrow at 11:30 Central, Sallie's going to be rejoining us with a mastermind show that'll be back tomorrow at 11:30 Central, 12:30 Eastern, where she's at. So let's take a quick break. We'll hear another snippet of Ricky Jean Wright in our theme song, It's Not the Getting There. And we'll be right back with Sallie Wagner and Warrior versus Zombie. All right, Sallie, I'm sure there's so much more we could talk about in your story, and I'm sorry for your loss, but I also know as warriors, we don't use those losses and changes as zombies as an excuse. We fight them back, we overcome them, and we keep moving forward. So, and I knew that was going to be your story, but I loved hearing it. So tell me, why are you doing what you're doing today? What kind of value? I can already translate some of that in my own brain. I'm looking ahead and seeing where you're going, but tell me about that.
I am doing what I'm doing because it's who I am. I
Mm-hmm.
feel it's my calling. And I was, doing some of my daily meditations recently, and that was one of the things that I was dwelling on. That I'm doing this because this is who I am, and I'm bringing value to other people. I think when we abdicate our power to make conscious choice, we're not being who we truly are. We're called to be fabulous people, each of us in our own way. To quote Howard Thurman, who was a mentor to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it." Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And so I truly hope and aspire to be that person who helps people discover what makes them come alive, and then gives them that little nudge to go and do it, because that's what we need in the world.
So I love that, and I really never thought about that. It's interesting. You just triggered a thought that I mean, not that there's not thoughts triggered every day, but when you said "come alive," the zombie is the Walking Dead, right? I
Yeah,
mean, the most
yeah.
what people think of when they think of zombies these days is the series The Walking Dead. And it really is. I mean, the metaphor works in so many levels, right? But it
Mhm.
really is, um, you know, find what makes you, I love that. Find what makes you come alive. If it's not, if you're going through the motions, such a powerful warrior nugget right there is just that if you just find yourself, going through those motions to not being alive, not being excited to wake up in the morning, not looking at the challenges that come your way and seeing them as opportunities, being anxious rather than excited. All these things have similar chemicals and they're still part of it, but one of them is your zombie mind moving you forward, and the other is the warrior, and the warrior is in your frontal lobe. It's thinking about it, looking at it, stepping out of that reaction. So, but the I love that quote. I'm gonna incorporate that into my thinking is really what makes you come alive, come out of that zombie mode.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your modality. Obviously, we're not going to drill down into that. We'll talk
Right.
about some of those, your MSG and stuff tomorrow, and some of that kind of stuff. But tell me a little bit more about that. So, what have you found to be the most effective or value? And then, if anything were possible, I want to hear about what kind of impact are you hoping to have as you go forward.
Yeah. So you mentioned MSG, and it bears a little bit of attention now. I think it stands for mindset, skill set, get off your asset, and it brings together some really important concepts. We have to have that mindset because Bob Proctor or other people have said it's 95% mindset and only 5% what you do. And so the mindset is one of self-efficacy. I have the power to make changes in my life instead of I'm just running on a program. I'm on autopilot. I'm the zombie, right? And so to change that mindset is really difficult for a lot of us, myself included, because we have all this programming that tells us that we need to be a certain way. So to be able to change that is quite an accomplishment. So I think the mindset piece is so important because it's those stories we tell ourselves about ourselves that really create our reality. And when we can change the stories, we change the reality, and then everything else changes.
And I love that. I mean, it's so true. I mean, and we talked about your story in the previous segment, and we've come from similar places. So if you come from scarcity, if that's the programming that you got, that mindset of scarcity versus abundance, and I know some of those are people throw around. You don't really think about it, but it's that I have to look at that myself. If time is not a factor, then you have time abundance. And so you don't worry about giving your time. If money is not a factor, you have money abundance and you can invest, you can grow. But even if they aren't a factor, if they're in your mindset, it's so brilliant when you think about it, is that you've got to get your mind aligned in a way that's giving you that space. And that's what some of the modalities that you're talking about, they give you the opportunity, as I see it, to actually look at what your history and where you're at, and they give you tools to disrupt that, to get on a different path, or to get on a better path, or to migrate. Right? Is that a
Absolutely, yes, because we do have so many things like perfectionism. A lot of us have that. And that was a big thing for me. That's a limiting belief, right? Because
it's very limiting. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, if I think I have to be perfect and I know I'm not going to be perfect, then I'm going to not do a lot of things because I'm not going to be perfect, right? It's going to hold me back. So it's those kinds of limiting beliefs that cause us to make limiting decisions that really limit everything about our lives. And part of the process of EFT, NLP, trauma aware, all of those things really help us, first of all, identify it as a limiting belief and then take action to change it.
Yeah, and that's and again, you said so many powerful things in that little for, first of all, the limiting belief, the concept of it really is, it's a fear that really is behind that. It's that scarcity, that limiting belief is embracing something that's not real. False evidence appearing real, fear, that's it's a lack of, it's that lack that creates that fear. And perfection is a fear. Perfection is, I don't want to be judged. Perfection is always one of the biggest obstacles to progress and leads to procrastination, which when you talk, I'm sure when you talk to people, let's say, they're in their language of imperatives, right? They're thinking, I need to, I should, I could. That's why this time of year, it's like resolutions. No, resolutions don't work, because you've got to get dump some stuff, and you've got to get your values aligned with that, because the reason you haven't done that up to this point is because you didn't value it, or you didn't believe you could do it, or you're too fearful for it. So I totally agree. So let me ask you this. If you could, if anything were possible, and oh, by the way, everything is possible by the book
Yes.
that I use most of my reference from, what would you like? What would you like to accomplish before you get to the end of your journey?
I would like to have impact in my family, my community, to really just be a beacon to people, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect at this, and yet to be a beacon to people, to show that it is possible to reclaim our power. It is possible to begin making conscious choices on
Mm-hmm.
the direction we want our lives to go. We don't have to continue to play out all of those programs and live the zombie life that was created for us by other people.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, yes. I mean, that's you're blazing a trail in your own way. We should all be a light, right? We should all be a beacon. So, of course, and especially I love the way you talked about it, because that's kind of the switch flip that I made about 17 years ago. Your family, your community, it start at home. There's a reason why um, start within your closest circle and work your way out, and be that beacon. I love it. And yes, we can. My 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 vision, my unique purpose, my reason, as I call it, is to change the world one dream at a time. You say, how can you do that? Well, you start with one person, and and then they can impact other people, and just work your way through it. Well, let's do this. Let's take our last break, and we'll get into what I call the land the plane segment. When we come back, I'll give you a minute to think about it, but I want to know, if we take away anything from this conversation, from your perspective, what would be the most important thing we take away, and then we'll be back. So let's take another quick break, hear a little more of Ricky Jean Wright, and It's Not the Getting There, our theme song, and we'll be right back with Sallie Wagner and the final segment of this episode of Warrior versus Zombie. Sallie, this has been a lot of fun. We're back, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And again, anybody that hears this before Friday, feel free to join us. We'll be streaming live on the Be Connected platform, as well as we'll be. Uh, you're invited to join our mastermind as we come. It's there for everybody. We want to have as much impact as possible. But tell me, the question I asked before we started, or I gave you a little bit of time to think about, if we take away anything from this discussion, what one or two, or what's the most important thing you want us to make sure we don't miss?
I would say this: it's not what you don't know that holds you back, it's what you do know that's not true that holds you back. And we've touched on this in our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We know, and air quotes for people who are not seeing me,
Mm-hmm.
we know so many things that are not true. And many times the solution to our challenges is to unlearn those things that we know that are not true. And that gets back to those limiting beliefs. And that gets
Mm-hmm.
back to giving ourselves permission to ask the question, what makes you come alive? So to unlearn those things that are holding us back, I think, is the big takeaway.
Wow, I've never heard anybody say it. It's one thing that I've said. I don't know if I've ever said it on this podcast, but I went on a wellness journey, and it's the same thing. I said it wasn't what I that I didn't know that was killing me. It was the things that I thought I knew that simply weren't true. And in that time frame, I went from thinking I was very healthy, if you will, and normal, if my kids would always say I'm not normal, but and all those things. But that became kind of my mantra as I was on that journey of losing 70 pounds and getting off all medications and increasing my metabolic age, and on this now journey to be 120 with the vitality of a 30-year-old. And it applies to every aspect of your life. There's so many things that your zombie brain will log to keep you safe that aren't true that keep you from moving forward as a warrior. So that is probably one of the most important takeaways anybody can take from anybody's story or anything, is just those things that you tell yourself that aren't really true, or that somebody else tells you. We get a lot of gaslighting going on these days that tell you, this is what you should do. Don't believe your eyes. Don't believe your heart. Believe really what we're telling you. And so don't take those zombies from inside or outside. So that's awesome. So tell me, Sallie, you're on the Be Connected platform, and I know you're relatively new here, and we'll work on that for you, and I think you'll find a very favorable audience here. But beyond that, how do we stay in touch with you?
My website is intentionallifecoaching.net. There's also a redirect if you just type in my name, Sallie, Sallie, Wagner.com, and it'll get you to the website. I invite everyone to connect, reach out. I'd love to have a chat, complimentary, and maybe take a little test drive with EFT and NLP and see what the fun is all about.
I love it. And yes, for sure. We will post, by the way, that link for those that are listening. If you go back to wherever whatever the podcast or wherever you're listening, I'll make sure we have that link in the show notes. So if you're driving, don't wreck your car. You'll have it. And then the other way is this Be Connected platform of social business, not social media. Nobody trusts media these days, and I don't blame them. But this is social business. And as I'm connecting with Sallie and connecting with other people, whether it's in person or virtually, we should all move forward with intention. And that's what this platform allows us to do. So, Sallie, it's been so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with our audience. I'm sure many people will be blessed by listening to this audience, and you've had some of the impact that you're hoping to have, being that beacon. But thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow. So with that, we'll be back next week with another episode and another warrior of Warrior versus Zombie. But for now, let's hear the final outro of It's Not the Getting There by Ricky Jean Wright. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Warrior versus Zombie.